Thank you for visiting Past the Wire TV, the YouTube channel of PastTheWire.com. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Past the Wire TV. We've got, I usually think we've got an interesting show, but I think this is really an interesting show because it's kind of I don't know, a tough subject that I think needs addressing. I'm here with my co-host, Jeff Metz, and our guest this evening is Mr. Harris Auerbach from California and of Unusual Heat fame. He's the man behind Spectacular Horse, Spectacular Sire, a lot of fun, that horse, lot of great memories of not only Unusual Heat, but of his offspring. So I'm sure he's been quite the thrill for you, Harris. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, he was everything, and we're still having fun with his daughters and having nice race horses we're breeding, and I really appreciate you guys inviting me.
Yeah, no, I'm so glad you could come on because, you know, Jeff and I were actually planning for a couple of weeks to do a show about the state of California racing and some of the, well, most of the short fields that we're seeing. I even joked to Jeff, and it's not really a joking matter, but we should come up with a couple of horses and just get some black type because some of these races come up, you know, so light and such small fields that it's hard to fathom. Now I'm in Florida. I follow racing across the country, so you guys probably know a lot more than I do as to why we're in the shape we are in California. But what got my attention, and one of the things I want to talk about is when Oaklawn announced they were extending their meet. Actually opening earlier, I think yesterday they announced they're going to start on December 3rd. Okay. I saw that as almost like a gut punch to some of the California barns that are trying to survive over there, and just to Santa Anita and the winter racing program there, and probably other tracks too, like Remington Park, I think runs during that time. And it's a tough situation because Oaklawn obviously is doing what they think is best for them. They've got a lot of slot money that they're giving out. Their meet is growing in popularity amongst fans and bettors year to year. And Santa Anita, I see as a place that, in my opinion, it would be dreadful to lose as a venue. And I don't know that California racing would even be able to continue on it at all if there was no Santa Anita meet and Santa Anita wasn't an integral part. So let's start there, Harris, and say, what was your reaction as someone who's well invested in California racing and I believe cares about it on a year-round basis and a big supporter of it? What was your take on Oaklawn's announcement yesterday and how it's going to impact California going forward?
Well, I agree with you, John. I think it was a salvo fired not only at California, but also at the fairgrounds and at Remington and at several. Sam Houston starts a little bit later than that. And I think part of the problem with a track like Oaklawn expanding, what they really specialize in are the claiming races on the dirt between the $5,000 and $25,000 levels, and that is the part of the inventory out here at Santa Anita which we are most desperately missing at that point. At that point in the year, you have the high-end barns going for maiden allowance and trying to develop Derby horses, but that's not enough to put together the racing program. And while that's going on, we are busy splitting the type of inventory we need to fill cards between two venues, with Santa Anita and Golden Gate running concurrently to one another. And with less horse population, we have less farms in California than 5, 10, 20 years ago, and less viable stallions too. It's really created a crunch here on the field size.
You know, I hate to be a gloom and doom kind of person, but it's I can't say I haven't seen this movie before, and I'll tell you why. When I first moved to Florida, I think it was around 1990. Okay, Gulfstream, Calder, Hialeah were all running. Okay, Hialeah was already involved in a years long bitter lawsuit with Calder over racing dates and over survival that had been going on for years. And Gulfstream at the time was kind of just that boutique winter meet that centered around the Florida Derby. And ultimately what happened is just without some sort of cooperation, which is very tough when everybody's in it for themselves and independently owned, and without some type of regulation or governing body, it was almost impossible for the tracks to survive, and ultimately they didn't. And it was a long, slow death as opposed to a fast death. And we all know that we're losing tracks. You know, the inaugural Breeders' Cup was run at Hollywood Park. Whoever thought we'd be sitting here and you know, I never thought when I went to the inaugural Breeders' Cup that Hollywood Park someday would be gone while I was still involved in racing. You know, I mean, it's a reality. These things can happen. I fear for Santa Anita and for the future of California racing. And, you know, I actually think the first shot wasn't Oaklawn. I think the first shot of the, and we've always been every man for themselves. Let's face it. We're an industry that can't stagger post times on the big races. Okay. Which actually helps everybody and costs nobody anything. And we can't manage to do that. But I thought last year during the pandemic, when Churchill Downs announced they were moving the Kentucky Derby without even talking to Maryland or New York, I thought that was kind of like a gut punch, as to say, hey, listen, it's the Derby. We care about us. We don't care about you. That's the best weekend for us. Never factored in that it's part of a Triple Crown series, and, you know, let's work out something that's best for everybody and for the industry. And you just don't see that. And I don't know that we can expect to see it. And you know, my take is, without a central governing body to kind of regulate these things, we're ultimately doomed to whatever the boutique meets that can survive, be that 5 or 10 years from now. And Del Mar probably won't be one of them, because if Santa Anita goes, probably Del Mar goes with it. And a lot of people don't realize that, but that's what I would think would happen. But if you look at other sports, okay, how did the big market teams, how did the small market teams, okay, in the smaller cities that don't have the revenue, that don't have the TV contracts, compete with the big market teams? Because there's a commissioner, there's a governing body that forces revenue sharing and different types of programs to keep everybody playing. So unless there's a neutral oversight of these kind of situations that says to Oakland, hey, wait a minute, that looks great on paper and that looks great for your bottom line, but you're going to kill this guy, and this guy, and if we kill them, eventually, you know, you're not going to be the only game in town. You'll fall too.
I think it's a lot like you say, you know, it's like you have pros, but if you don't have AAA and AA, I mean, these guys are, you know, you're going from high school to the pros. There's no tracks in between. And like Harris said, the $5,000 to $25,000 claimers, you know, they're pretty much, before you used to have every level, you know, 10,000, 12.5, 16, 20, you'd have all of those. Now there's big gaps. Like you'll go from a 16 won't fill. So you either run in a 12.5 or a 25 because you have to adjust one way or the other. And then I think some of the bigger barns in Southern California, you know, they've been venturing off to Oaklawn Park with sometimes 20 or 30 of their horses just to run, you know, one for the money, two for a little less regulation with the Lasix and the whipping rule that we have, as well as the protocols that are in place with the vets checking the horses and the panel that can scratch horses as they feel necessary. So there's a lot of regulations. I mean, I see both sides of it. I'm all for the most beneficial for the horse and the safety of the horse. So I'm for that. And when other trainers ask me, hey, how's California? And I tell them, I said, you know, you get used to it. You get used to signing up 2 days before a workout. You get used to having your horse checked by different veterinarians, and you just get used to the way they do things. You know, you're only allowed to use 5 cc's of Lasix, and you in stakes races, you can't use Lasix, and 2-year-olds we know can't use Lasix in California. But I say whatever it is, you get used to it. But I agree with you. Just this morning, talking about what you touched on Oaklawn Park, putting that article out. I read it. You know, Asmussen and Wayne Lucas said, man, that's great. You know, it's going to start a little sooner. So that's almost an extra 6 to 8 weeks that they're racing. And so the vibe on this morning at Santa Anita, some of the trainers were like, wow, I can't believe the money. The minimum they're going to give for allowance is $100,000. So, I mean, it's just very enticing. The cost of living is less. You know, obviously the competition is going to be tough, but the purse money is extraordinary. And when you're an owner and you can run 4th or 5th and pay your bill for the month, then that sets you up for the next time. But Harris, what's your thoughts on California racing in general?
Well, I think both of your points are correct, Jeff, and yours too, John. Racing as a whole is an ecosystem, and you need all the levels of racing to be healthy. And I think one of the things that we face in California, not only with the extra regulation and everything else, is the fact that we're on this island and there's only so many horses and barns that are going to ship here. And so you are not competing. It's not like 15 years ago when we had a guy like Ron Charles running Santa Anita, and we had strings from the big barns, from Todd Pletcher, from Christophe Clement, from Steve Asmussen for a few years. Nobody has recruited those barns effectively since. And with Oaklawn coming to prominence, they now have another alternative to running at Gulfstream and to not getting in the races there. So one of the things, and Barry Abrams tipped me in on this, and I didn't really buy into it as much then, and now I fully buy into it. This was back in 2010 when Hollywood Park started talking about going to 4 days a week racing. And Barry talked about the domino effect to that. He told me at the time, and I said, what, if they don't do that, we're going to have a purse cut. He said, don't you get it? We're having a 20% purse cut, losing the day, going from 5 days to 4. And boy, was he right. Not only do you're losing that day's worth of purses, it's a vicious cycle where we've gone from 4 days, which remarkably we held on to for a decade, down to 3. And we're now barely filling the 3 days a week at this point. So my feeling is the quick and easy fix for California, and I know there's different interests involved, but we should be running one circuit at this point. It's kind of obvious. You run Santa Anita from Christmas Day through the Santa Anita Derby. Then you run April, May, June, early July at Golden Gate. You go back to Del Mar. You run a boutique September meet at Golden Gate, and then a month at Santa Anita and a month at Del Mar. The only thing you're losing at Santa Anita are the old Hollywood spring dates, which have proven the last 4 or 5 years are not working. And Jeff, you could probably attest to this. I saw the turf course on TV this weekend and was horrified at the condition. I've never seen brown spots in the stretch of the Santa Anita turf course on TV, but they've had to use 4 and 5 races a day just to fill cards.
Yeah, you know, I think on management side, twofold thing. One is the races fill, and 2, they bet more on those turf races. So as they start to wind down and say, boy, we have 2 racing weekends left at Santa Anita. And they're like, for the last 4 weeks, I mean, they took about what, 6 weeks ago, they took 2 weeks off of the turf, but I don't think that was enough because yeah, there's just a lot of hoof prints from all the horses running, and now you're seeing dirt kicking up, and you're seeing much more brown spots because those are hoof prints that they just can't fill in. Even if you fill them in with sand, there's still holes in the turf. So it's very suspect and a little bit dangerous out there right now on the turf, because if the horses step in a hole, you know, anything can happen. It's like you said, now we're at 3 days a week and we're struggling to fill those 3 days a week. You know, the Del Mar has done a pretty good job of advertising the Ship and Win program. I mean, they put it on TV quite a bit, and they're trying to get some trainers to come out here. I hear Mark Cassie and Michael Maker are going to come out. And so, you know, that's like you said, that's recruiting. That's trying to get people out here, whatever it takes. Now, Santa Anita had a similar Ship and Win. They gave a $3,000 shipping when you first come, but I don't think it was advertised that much. You know, it was in the front of the condition book, but unless you read it, I don't think a lot of people knew about it. I had a couple horses come from Washington and they ran, and they got that. But you know, I just think, like you said, it's too bad on 2 points, Harris and John. Every man for himself is kind of like, well, I just worry about my track and I'm not worried about all of California. And we got a big problem coming down the road in a couple of years, because we don't know how long Los Alamitos is going to be around for racing and or training. And taking those, you know, a lot of the horses that stabled at Hollywood Park went to Los Alamitos. But even Los Alamitos, they're nighttime. They're really struggling to fill races. I mean, I think if it ever does get sold or developed, I mean, that goes away. I think quarter horse racing almost is non-existent in California. And those cheaper dirt races, right now they're saying, well, if you run at Los Al 2 times in a row, they don't want you to run at Del Mar. And but those are sometimes $5,000 to $15,000 claiming horses that I think if they could get creative and write something, that they could include those all into the mix. But I agree with Harris that there's only so many number of horses. And then one of the things is you have some really big barns. They have 100 horses, and they might have some of these horses, but they can only run, they don't like to run more than 1 or 2 in those races. I mean, if you have a guy with 5 maiden specials ready to go, he can't run all 5. You'll be lucky if he runs 3, and he most likely will run 2. And we're seeing 5-horse fields, special weights, allowance races, and stakes races, 5-horse fields. One trainer's got 2, another horse trainer has 2, and another trainer has 1. And there's, you know, we're glad those guys put 2 in there. Like John said, we could have a horse just go around and collect 4th place money sometimes because, you know, but you have to pay those entry fees to get in there, and you're going to make X amount of dollars just to run around the track. It doesn't really help things because that horse that's 50 to 1 on the board, you know, he's not going to get too much action. And yeah, you get another number on there. But I do think that, I think there needs to be hopefully some kind of a group effort with everybody and get them, you know, a nice round table going and saying, you know what, we need to all work together here, and we need to make a plan for the future and work together, because it's going to be one of these things where we said every man for himself. Like as the ship goes down, it's like, well, this track's going by the wayside. This track's, you know, there's just not enough horses to go around. And this is not just at Santa Anita that I hear people on the rail saying, you know, I'm looking at other places to go. I have friends at Golden Gate, and they're saying the same thing. You know, I'm looking at other tracks. I'm looking at the Midwest. I'm looking here because, you know, these guys leave Southern California or Northern California, and they're getting, you know, some guys have gone to Kentucky, some guys have gone to Oakland, and they went from 10 horses to 20 horses just because there's more owners, there's more breeding, there's more opportunity there, and the purse money backs all of that up. So I do think we're in some heavy waves and waters here that we're going to have to navigate, and hopefully we can all get on the same page.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, Jeff, and it starts really at the beginning, at the bottom with the breeding. And I could share with you guys that 10 years ago, we had 27 brood mares in California. Now, a big part of that was unusual heat, obviously, and we were breeding to him and then breeding his daughters to a lot of good sires like Tribal Rule and Bertrando and Benchmark and all the sorts. Well, we've lost a lot of those sires, and we've lost a lot of the farms. We used to have Vessels and River Edge. They were premier farms. Paina Vista just went out of business last year. They were a big stallion station. So we've shrunk the number of farms. We've had mares leaving, and at this point, I shipped my last broodmare out of California last year. I have my entire broodmare bands in Kentucky because I not only have a choice of sires, but I also, when those babies become yearlings, I have a choice of sales, where here there's been tremendous instability in the sales market. And I know the frustration Fasig-Tipton has had coming into the market with changing venues and problems with the Los Angeles County Fair and with the breeders not supporting them fully. If you look at the list of the top 10 breeders in California, they're almost all breed to race guys, between Paul Redham and Dick Barton and Nick Alexander and Terry Levenger. And the problem is they're not dispersing enough of those horses among different barns to help fill fields, and they're not putting their good stock in the sales for people to buy. So it's a vicious cycle to where Calbred races, yes, they're important and they're making up even more of the race cards than they ever have, but it's the same 4 or 5 guys in every race. And it becomes an uninteresting betting product on top of it when you know who's going to win, basically going in. If it's a short turf, you're looking at the Square Eddie. If it's a longer, you're looking at Grays. And if it's a 2-year-old, you know, it's going to be Louis Mendez or Terry Levenger winning the race, almost guaranteed early on in the season. And it's not helping the cause that different people don't have these horses.
It's so frustrating. I could say, you know, as someone who's bet on the California races for years and years and years, I've just watched what I would have to describe as just a steady decline in quality and wagering opportunities, and just it, like you said, Harris, it tempers the enthusiasm. And you know, for someone like myself, I take betting different than a lot of people. I look at it as a business, as like in investing, almost like people may look at the stock market or something like that, you know. So I'm going to do it where I feel it's the best opportunity to do it, you know. And California used to be at the top of that list because of the pool size and the quality of racing. And it's just, you know, I've just watched it whittle away and whittle away and whittle away. And I think you hit the nail on something when you said, you know, right now, the short fix, I would have to agree, would be 1 meet at a time. And have all the horses focused on one circuit. I don't think you guys can support, you know, meets running at the same time. You've got Golden Gate running against Santa Anita.
And they're the same company.
Right, exactly, exactly. And you know, the other thing I think about is, and you know, I don't have any crystal ball or anything, but I think if I'm the person that's in charge of the Stronach group, and I'm looking at Santa Anita as a problem, as a complicated fix that I can't even fix on my own. I need other people to come to the table and work with me to fix it, or I can just sell it and get a big fat check and walk away. At what point, I worry as a racing fan, as someone who doesn't want to see one of the most beautiful backdrops in horse racing, Santa Anita. I mean, I hated it with Hollywood Park. I hated it with Calder. You know, I mean, I used to go to Calder all the time. I live in Florida. I mean, it was heartbreaking to me. You know, you know, Arlington Park, another one, going by the wayside. You know, so I worry at some point is somebody going to say, you know what, Santa Anita, let's check out, let's cash out. You know what I mean? The property's got, who knows what it's worth.
I know, you know, during the pandemic, kind of kind of touched on one of Harris's points, and it proved it, that when Golden Gate was the only track running, guys shipped up there and ran their horses from Santa Anita, because now all of a sudden there's 10 and 12 horse fields, and they're able to run an extra race or two a day, because now you have not only the San Francisco based trainers with their allowance horses, but also the Southern California guys coming together. So making this really strong race. And sometimes it happens in reverse. The Northern California trainers bring a mixed bag of horses down to Del Mar, and they compete with the Southern California regulars. And then what happens is some of those guys in Northern California, they win, because Del Mar is not like a year-round training place. So these horses are coming on off a synthetic track, and they're running on natural dirt. And the horses at Santa Anita haven't been training for maybe just a couple of days, and they're running on a fresh kind of dirt. And it's just kind of a mixed bag and a fair playing field. And I think that shows when you bring all these horses together, whether it be in Northern California, Golden Gate, the dirt horses trying synthetic, or vice versa, those synthetic horses coming down and running on the dirt. It shows wherever you put the opportunity, then the people will go there. But right now there's more opportunity than there is horses.
I wanted to touch on the quality thing a little bit with Jonathan here. I could share with you, we had a horse, his name was Lenny from Malibu. We never ran him in a graded stake, but he ran 8 straight 100 plus buyer figures, running in allowance and state bred races. You don't find that on the circuit now, because either the allowance races are optionals that are begging horses going down the ladder to fill them, or they're pushing them into graded stakes, which aren't filling them. I've always been a proponent. Southern California was a gold standard. We need to do everything we can to protect the graded stakes. But you look at the graded stakes, and even the Calbred, they ran the Franz Valentine and the Tisnow with 4 horses each. We cannot continue at the expense of the everyday horseman to fund these $100,000 and $200,000 races that have 4 horses and are bringing in no handle. I understand we want good horses on the circuit, and we don't want to become Gulfstream after the championship meet, but there's got to be a better balance to it.
The other thing is very surprising is these races aren't even attracting, other than the odd, Kenny McPeak came out the other day, but not many people are shipping out here, and they got to see what's happening where there's 4 horse stake races. And, the field size to me is 8, 10, 12 horses in some of the stakes in back east in the Midwest. Recently, we've had this, flying of horses has been a little difficult with the with Tex Sutton issue, but still, horses, when they had to get to New York and Belmont, they got there to run, and that was a tremendous card on Belmont Day with all those stakes and full fields, and our California guys went there and they held their own, and so it's just unfortunate, because I think our guys are going Oaklawn and New York and Kentucky way more than those guys are coming out this way. And it's not that they should. I mean, we wish they should. We wish they would, because you're giving away 100,000 and you're taking a shot. You win, you make 60,000, and if you're second, you make 20, and so on. But when you're competing with 4 other horses, it also does really change the complexion of a race, because now you don't have 8 horses and a couple of speed horses and a couple of closers. It really becomes a tactical race, and sometimes a rider's race, because short fields, and there's just less tactics in those short fields.
Yeah, and part of the fallout is we've lost over half of our grade 1 races in the last 14 years, and poised to lose a few more after this year. If I'm judging what the American Graded Stakes Committee does, and I think we need a downsizing of stakes races all across the country. I think that's been the one thing people have been reluctant to give up. And as a breeder, it's counterintuitive for me to say that, but I'd like to see more quality across the board in terms of that all over.
It used to be with, if a 2-year-old won, you were pretty much nothing but stakes races were your option. And now it's almost the same thing with 3-year-olds. If 3-year-olds are winners, you have no choice but to go and go into stakes, because the allowance races don't fill because they're going in the stakes. There's only so many horses. There's not enough to fill the allowance and the stake. So the stakes horses are already slated to go there, and the allowance horses kind of get pushed there because there's no other choice.
And I'll tell you, you don't only see that if you look really close, okay, and you follow certain meets like I do. You don't only see that in California, okay? Saratoga has long been one of the premier meets in the country, okay? And I've been going to Saratoga since I'm a little kid, all right? And Saratoga used to be, okay, primarily maiden special weight races, okay? One or two claiming races, and the rest were, you know, a stake race every day, and the rest were conditioned allowance races. And I'm not talking about the races we see today where, you know, non-winners of a race other than, or horses that are entered for 50 down to 45. The optional claim is where they get all kinds of mixes in there. But they were straight non-winners of a race other than maiden claiming or starter. Non-winners of two. And those races filled, and people used to use them as preps for stakes. So you saw horses that were going to run back in stakes running in those non-winners of 1, 2, 3, even non-winners of 4 races used to fill. Now, when you look at a Saratoga card, you see New York bred maiden claimants 2 or 3 times a day, 25 down to 20. You never saw that up there. So they don't have the same problem as far as the horse shortage, because there's enough New York breds and there's enough people supporting that program that they're able to pull in those full fields, but they've got to write cheaper, non-Saratoga-esque races in order to do it. Similar to the Gulfstream meet, you know, that they call the championship meet. I mean, you know, years ago when I first moved to Florida, same thing. That meet was a little shorter, a little tighter, and a big bump up on quality. Now you've got a lot of you know, lower level claiming races making up a lot of those cards, especially if you get away from the 2 or 3 or 4, whatever it is, big Saturdays that they have at that meet. So I think the lack of quality is a problem across the country. The lack of good horses, and I think, like you said, Harris, the fact that we have so many different stakes and so many different options are diluting the fields. You know, the field sizes are getting smaller. So there's got to be some kind of balance, like you said. And you know, I hate to come back to this, but I really just, you know, I've got no faith in our industry to do anything constructive and positive for themselves. Okay,
I'll put this question to Harris and see what his thoughts are. But I know you've touched on a few things so far, but what do you think would be a few of the things that we could strategize together and make a little bit of a turnaround?
Well, I think one big thing, and I don't know how either one of you feel on it. I think HISA, with even its flaws, and it is a good start. It's going to, for one thing, put a level playing field on the medication rules, put some standards, and stop a little bit of the nonsense on this. One of the big frustrations, and I know you currently have a thing, Jeff, going on that's very frustrating, where you guys did nothing wrong, and that's prosecuted and gone after, and hopefully it gets settled, because everybody knows you didn't do anything. The horse came to you.
Yeah.
But it's a big frustration in life, and I'm sure it frustrates everybody on this call for a lot of years to watch people and things where, you know, there's some nefarious activity, or guys who are ahead of the curve winning an awful lot of races, where a lot of us, and it affects everything, and it affects people on the ownership level. It affects people wanting to come in the game. It's a perception thing. And I think HISA's a good start. Let's level it out. One of my frustrations with Oaklawn Park, I don't believe they care nearly about horse welfare like the other circuits. They haven't shown it. They don't match funds to the Thoroughbred Aftercare Alliance or Karma or the Florida Project. like the Stronach Group does. And that's one of the good points of the Stronach Group. They're very forward thinking on horse welfare. And even the money they've invested in terms of machinery, the PET scan machine at Santa Anita is to be applauded. But we need that everywhere. And we also need the gamblers and the owners to feel like they are going by the same set of rules no matter where they run. The way the stewards officiate a race is different in New York than California. That should be standardized.
Well, not only that, Harris, I got to do it. It's different on Wednesday than it is on Thursday at the same circuit.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it to where they pull a Bayern and it's a DQ, and then 90% of the time it isn't.
Right. I mean, we had one at Naira last month. I think it was the same day. It was the almost identical incidents. One horse came down, one horse didn't. I mean,
so we have to have some uniformity. Another thing in California, and I got to get this off my chest, that we desperately need to do, we are throwing away $5 million a year, keeping open 2 alternative training sites in Los Alamitos and San Luis Rey, neither of which is full the entire year. And there's empty stalls at Santa Anita. We've got to get a lot smarter with how we spend our money and what we do. Part of the trade-off for giving Dr. Allred dates at Los Alamitos during the daytime initially was that he was giving the industry a great discount on the stabling there. Well, when Brad McKenzie passed away, unfortunately, that discount went away with Jack Liebau coming in there, yet they continued to award afternoon dates to Los Al. Now, I don't have a problem running there, and I actually think it gives some of the barns who don't win as much a chance to do so. But you can't have nighttime racing there and daytime racing there and then give them $5 million a year to stable horses that we really don't have the money and we really don't have the horses for. Between Santa Anita, Del Mar, Golden Gate, we need to figure it out, because between the 3 of them, they have close to 5,000 stalls, and I guarantee you there's maybe 3,000 horses in the state as a whole. So I'm not sure what we're doing. That's up to the associations and the TOC to figure that out.
See, I'm not even aware of that, and that just goes more to what I'm saying. That's just nuts, in my opinion. I mean, there needs to be somebody steering that ship and straightening those kind of things out. And I agree. I think HISA, HISA, whatever you call it, is a fantastic start. I'm optimistic about it. I think it's long overdue, and I'm hoping it does what we think it's going to do, and levels the playing field and brings some uniformity across the board. I don't know how involved they're going to be in overseeing issues that get away from medication and drugs, which I think that's a big step. Like you said, I think that hurts the game at every level. But I still think it goes back to we need some type of central governing system, be it a commissioner or a governing body or a board or something that kind of forces the racetracks to look at the big picture and work together for the better of the sport and the better of the game across the board. If we're ever going to be the kind of sport that we were and compete with what we have to compete with today. And I think his is a great start, and I hope it evolves into that, because like I was saying before, I've lost faith in the industry to be able to do it on their own. And what you just told me about California furthers that. You know what I mean? Because these are low-hanging fruit fixes, Harris, that you're talking about. You know what I'm saying?
I think there's a lot of low-hanging fruit fixes in California. And
right.
The fact that the Stronach Group owns Santa Anita and Golden Gate and can't seem to coordinate everything. And I've had high hope with Craig Fravel coming in. What he did at Del Mar was brilliant over the years. He was the driving force, which turned it from a glorified fair meet into a premier summer circuit. I remember being a kid and Hollywood Park being the premier meet, not Del Mar.
Right.
And Craig did a wonderful thing in the whole narrative of turning it around. Now, in my opinion, it's gotten to be more about concerts and expensive margaritas and all that. And Del Mar will be fine this summer. They'll recruit enough horses for 4 days a week. I know they start off with a couple 3-day weeks, which was disappointing to me to see, but they'll do fine. My problem is what happens after Del Mar when we come into the next winter meet here and we have another drop in inventory because the breeding numbers aren't getting any better. The instability in the sales market. Santa Anita was supposed to be part of the solution to that. They have not been. They are holding a 2-year-old sale, but it's been an arduous process again for the sales company to put it on. And once again, it's not being supported by the sellers with only 105 horses entered, half of whom are coming from Florida.
And the other thing is, you as an owner, Harris, you know, I think this is just human nature, but I mean, if you have a horse that's not competitive at Santa Anita, you ship him out to another state where he's competitive. And also there's some things where, you know, with our medication rules, this horse might need more Lasix or he's a bleeder. You can't even send him to Golden Gate because it's the same rules there. So you really, this horse leaves the state and it goes to a jurisdiction where he can be competitive. You know, the horses that have had bisphosphonates in their system, like you touched on, I mean, those horses are practically ruled off for life in California now because they have to go. I've seen, you know, horses that are no longer running in here. That's a whole nother topic for another day because I learned a lot more about that than I wanted to. But the, you know, that's another thing that it just, you know, these bleeders or these little, there's even horses that, you know, they don't like the way they move and they don't want to let them run. So they end up having to go somewhere else or they get retired. But that I just think all these things compound on each other and it starts to shrivel our horse population. And then you add on top of it, maybe you got a healthy, sound horse and he's quality. And they're like, well, we could run here for 60 or we could run over here for 100, you know, and that's an allowance race. So, I mean, it's not that other than the shipping. I mean, you're talking horse guys ship across country to run in $100,000 stake race. So certainly they'll run to, you know, if they take a handful of horses and go for $100,000 or $110,000 allowance race. So it's you know, other tracks are offering big prize money. They're offering less regulations. And I think it's, you know, half the guys love California and they love the weather and they love the beautiful backdrop and our families are here. But I think the other half of the people, I hear grumblings that, wow, that sure looks good. You know, obviously the grass always looks greener on the other side until you're there and it's 30 degrees in the morning and the track's frozen. But, you know, for you put up the money, people will deal with a lot of things. I mean, look at Kentucky Downs. They put up $140,000 allowance race and people will go very far away in the, I don't want to say the middle of nowhere, but it's not easy to get to for horsemen, but they'll ship there and they'll have 10 horses on the also eligible list to get in a race. So it's one of these things where you put up the money and they will come. But unfortunately, a lot of other people are putting up money and California's in a quandary right now.
Yeah, and I think to further your point, Jeff, I think there's a solution that can help the horsemen with horses can't run in California. How about California and the tracks here sit down with Arizona and Washington? Because they sort of, to me, it's always been one circuit. You have Turf Paradise, and a lot of those horses go to Emerald Downs afterwards. Why don't we sit down with them and work out if we go to one circuit, you know, that there's some sort of incentives for horses to go back and forth where they're running their meets there to where the horses that can't compete at Santa Anita or Golden Gate can run at Emerald Downs and still, and, you know, make it easy for the trainers with one workers' comp and one trainer's license and one owner's license. That's another thing in racing. We had a filly about 3 years ago. She was running named Miraculously. She was a Kentucky bred. With Brendan Walsh, I had her at first. And we ran in Florida, Kentucky, Delaware, at Arlington Park, and in Del Mar. I needed licenses for every state we ran in. is the most ludicrous thing of all time. And I understand they want you to pay a fee and all that, but just put it in the starter's fees or something, and make one license, make it easy for people to get into the game, to have access, and on a smaller level, to have some sort of regional program out west where all of the circuits are on an island. Seems to make a lot of sense to me. But they've always, for whatever reason, Santa Anita's viewed Turf Paradise as competition, where it's hardly
Right.
anything like that.
Different world. You know, one thing that might get interesting, that's I think going to be touchy for us. We're all, I believe, on this show very much in favor of HISA and drug reform and weeding out people that are doing things, as you said, nefariously and internet. But I was on a show a couple of weeks ago with a couple of veterinarians, and they were talking about, if we move away from a lot of drugs being Lasix being one of them too quickly, without some type of a sensible transitional period, we may lose more horses for a shorter time in order to get strong again. So they were concerned that, you know, too fast of an implementation of no Lasix, no this, no that, and not really knowing where HISA was going to go, could even reduce field sizes and horse populations of horses that are ready and able to run right now even more. And that's something that I think the three of us kind of, yeah, we want to see that regulation, but I think we don't want to see a byproduct of it of losing even more horses. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I know when they say no Lasix in the stakes races, and the stakes races are the fastest horses on the grounds, and they got to really go head and head like we saw in the Belmont battling down the stretch. But so in California and some other states are doing this too, but no Lasix for the best horses on the grounds. That doesn't seem fair. The other thing is, I thought the understanding was last year's 2-year-olds were going to not run on Lasix. So I thought when they became 3-year-olds, they would continue to not run on Lasix, but it wasn't the case. Oh, when they became 3, if you wanted to run on Lasix, you could. I thought it was going to be a transition period where, okay, all the foals of, which would be 2017, which are 2018, which are 3-year-olds now. That was the first wave of horses, 2-year-olds that weren't going to be able to run on Lasix. So if you start their career with not running on Lasix, and then you continue throughout their career that they can't run on Lasix, then that would be the way that horse went. But I think to have these 6- and 7-year-old stakes horses that have been running on Lasix for up to 5 years, and now you just take it away from them, that doesn't seem, you know, fair and humane to that. And I know one of the big things people say is, well, we don't want horses getting drugs on race day. But in California, the tracks are the ones that are giving Lasix. So unless the person you hired to give Lasix is giving nefarious drugs, I mean, the race day Lasix is given by the governing body of the track, the people hired by the track. So it's not the private vets of the trainers coming in and adding a little something to the Lasix and they're giving them whatever. So that's I know on this Lasix thing, you know, I just think if the horses need it, you know, they should be able to get it. I know some people, and I read it on social media quite a bit. They're like, every country in the world doesn't run on Lasix. We don't need to run on Lasix. Well, I thought that's where we were going with the 2-year-olds, and then they become 3-year-olds, and then the next wave of 2-year-olds. So pretty soon, in about 3 years, your 2, 3, and 4-year-olds are all non-Lasix horses. That's what I thought was
That's what I thought too. And I think what happened, I think the race associations got a little bit scared of it and they backed down. I know, talking about the stakes races in California, I still speak regularly to Doug Burge, the president of CTBA, of the Breeders Association, and they were negotiating, and they did get it through that the 4 and up Calbred stakes, the stakes run really during the winter meet, would be allowed to use LASIK because those horses all came up on it. And I understood the 4 and up being, and I understand the problem with the 3 and up. But like you said, Jeff, it was very confusing with the 3-year-old restricted races. They allowed LASIKs in them, but they're not allowing them in 2-year-old races. To me, if you're going to cut the cord on it, you do it all the way. You can't get a little bit pregnant. And right now, it's just another example of dysfunction, of rules that don't make sense, of people trying to hedge bets and all that. And something that is designed, in my opinion, to ultimately help the horses and help integrity, well, they really backed down. They backed off on it. And I agree with you, Jeff. I don't see how a 6 or 7-year-old running on LASIKs hurts anybody if they've been doing it their whole career. If you want to make it a fair playing field with horses that are 3 and up, that 3-year-olds can't run on it, put in a huge weight allowance or something.
And the other thing is, if you have a race like the Pegasus World Cup and you advertise it as a LASIK-free race, then it's your choice as an owner and trainer to go in that. And I know it's your choice to run in those stakes races, but I was watching at Keeneland, and one of the trainers there, he was doing a post-race interview, and he said, well, my horse, he ran really hard. He ran a game second, but as he was walking back, we saw some blood in his nose, so he's not going to be able to run back in a month or 2. It's going to take a while to heal him up, hope he doesn't get sick, heal any scar tissue in his lungs, and hope that vicious cycle of bleeding doesn't reoccur. So, that's, John, I've known you've had some big conversations on the LASIKs, but that was just medications, LASIKs. Those are just some of the things we wanted to touch on as far as California. And like Harris said, sometimes we think one thing and then it kind of changes, which is fine. I mean, people are adaptable, but hopefully things continue to get smoother as opposed to more complicated.
I don't know how you trainers do it, frankly, where you go to different jurisdictions and the rules are different everywhere, and you really have to be expert. It makes it really difficult.
Luckily, John, Harris, and myself, we've been to a lot of tracks in the country, and luckily, I think any track we wanted to go to, we could probably reach out to somebody, and that's really what we do as trainers. Hey, we're coming into a race in Pennsylvania. I call a friend of mine. Hey, what's the rules out there? What are medication rules? What are joint injection rules? Can you run on Bute? Can you run on this or that? And the time frame, is it 1 day, 2 days out? So, I mean, me going to different jurisdictions, I learn the rules, and then if they get adjusted, we go with it. But if you're going into a brand new state and you're running in Indiana or Ohio, you want to check with somebody there, not only your trainer friends, but then also the veterinarians, because they're, they don't want to get in trouble either. So they're up on, hey, make sure your horse hasn't had any this or that in its system, and you'll be good to go.
Well, hopefully that's one of the things that HISA is going to get rid of right away, because they're just going to establish, one set of rules across the board for everybody, so it won't change from track to track and state.
If you came up with every state in the U.S. had the same medication rules, and one license covered you for all the states, maybe when you signed up, you said, okay, I'm only going to run in New York, and it's X amount of dollars. But then you say, I want a multi-jurisdiction license, and it's maybe twice as much. I don't think Harris and I care that it's twice as much. We don't want to be sending fingerprints in the day before. They say, oh, we didn't get your things, and we need you here, and we need this and that. It's like, the fingerprints didn't change from 2 years ago, but you want it again in 2 years. I get it if you want to run an FBI check or whatever, but that's what our social security numbers, all these different things. But really, it's, as we know, ownership, breeding, training, it's hard enough as it is. We don't need these little hoops to jump through when we're worried about getting the horse there and the groom there and the jockey there. And you want to make movement a little easier. I will say the new thing with the Jockey Club, where you can just email the papers to the next track, that is much better, because we're in this modern era where we all email. So why not? Now we can change the ownership. If one guy sells out, okay, he's off, another guy gets on, you change the ownership, you send it into the track. It's one click of the button and you're ready to go. As opposed to, hey, the FedEx didn't come, the papers aren't here, we're going to have to scratch your horse. So there's definitely been improvements, but I think, like you said, a governing body, a national owner license, some of these things would be fantastic, because even the national compact, some tracks don't accept that. So there's just nothing that's all inclusive at the moment in the US.
Yeah, no, and a lot of this is like we said, is what I would call low hanging fruit. It's easy fix. You know, just got to get everybody on the same page, and then unfortunately, I think it's going to take some type of governing body to do that, because I think, you know, the men and every track for themselves attitude has been so long in this game that it's just what everybody's used to, and nobody sees the big picture. Like, you know,
I think John and Harris would both go for this, because, you know, the big markets need the small markets, and you need the in-between markets. So that way, as a breeder or an owner or trainer, you have somewhere to go with these horses. Because it's like, well, if they're not good enough for the A League, just get rid of them. Well, there's plenty of other circuits where they could run, be competitive, make money. And if we did this like the NBA, John likes sports. So if you said, hey, we want to have this meet here and this meet here, you know, when the NBA wants to have a team in Oklahoma, they have to get approval from the committee and the commission to say, okay, yeah, we're going to have this here. And it's kind of like when we go for the dates of the different jurisdictions, we need to, you know, in us talking today about California, I mean, sometimes there's, like Harris said, there could be too much racing right now. And yeah, you want more opportunity, but if you only have 3,000 horses when you used to have 5,000, that's got to give somewhere. And we have in the days, we've gone from 5 to 3. Harris, do you remember at Del Mar, we used to run 6 days a week?
Oh, yeah.
And then after that, we'd go to Pomona and run 21 days straight. So, you know, it's definitely, times have changed. It's more expensive now. Some people have gotten out of the business. And, you know, it's unfortunate to hear today that, you know, Harris said his last broodmares are no longer in California. And all those farms that he mentioned, they're no longer, you know, breeding or boarding horses. Some's because they just, the numbers have dwindled. The numbers of foals, they're just less and less. And, you know, I think it is a big concern for California.
Yeah, I mean, the cost of land, the cost of doing business, the new ag laws with employment, everything makes it difficult. That's why we in the industry have to work together and stop working apart, especially within our own state here. And we have to make serious decisions that some people aren't going to like, that are going to be unfair, that are going to be viewed as bad. A perfect example of a racing thing, I'm sure you've noticed, Jeff, all the starter optional races and different starter allowances, which have pulled from the claiming game, which have spread the fields out even thinner, and all that. We need to get back to a little bit of basics. A non-winners of one claiming, a non-winners of 1 or 2 allowance, 1 dirt, 1 turf, 1 long, 1 short. It's really not that complicated at this point, but we've got to get everybody in the mindset that this can work. The trainers, the owners, all that. And we've got to have people stop looking at their win percentages as owners and trainers. I always came from the school, and my dad taught me this, having owned horses since the 70s. If we're winning at more than 10%, or for a while you could be 15, 20% if you get really hot for a while, but if you're winning any more than that, it means one of 2 things. You're either running the horses in too low a category of races, you're not challenging, you're going for low-hanging fruit, and at which point, if there's claiming races, there's consequences for that. And these starter allowances, there are not. they can just pick off, pick off, pick off. And, or there's something else going on because nobody is that good. I've known every horseman on the backside of Santa Anita and Hollywood Park and Del Mar. I've known them well the last 20 years there. And I can tell you there's a lot of very talented people to where nobody should be winning at percentages that some do. And I'm hopeful that the new rules will level the playing field and get some of that out of here. And hopefully the racing office will start helping that. I know both Del Mar and Santa Anita's racing offices are well-intentioned in doing everything they can to fill races, but they need some help from the horsemen. And we need a little tough love, I think, on all levels.
I think on the point you make is if you come up with your plan, you know, the people, the powers that be, they come up with their plan and they put it in place. Tough love, as you say, people are going to adjust. They're either going to go with it or they're going to leave, but they're going to leave anyway. So why not try and fix it for the betterment of California racing?
Jeff, regarding the Oaklawn thing, and this is something that's always puzzled me about the Stronach group. 3 or 4 years ago, I thought when some of the guys started splitting their strings, and they were sending out very specific groups of horses, those 10, 16, and 25 claimers, that they didn't put in a thing that, hey, if you stable there, you're not going to be welcome back here. Might have kept some of those barns and horses here now. I'm not one for restriction and overregulation, but I was always surprised that it was treated so cavalierly that it won't hurt us.
Yes, especially now because, so you have a few guys that, you know, Southern California trainers, they have 80 or 100 horses. So it's easy for them to go ahead and take 20 or 30 out there and they can, with that group of horses, but that group of horses should be running at Santa Anita because you're giving them stall space at Los Alamitos or San Luis Rey Downs. And so for them to just pick up and take their horses there when they paid to get them ready, you know, and housed them, and then they go there and get their starts, and then they come back here. I'm surprised that they don't, look a little more unfavorable at it. I mean, obviously they didn't like people running at Los Alamitos because Del Mar, I don't know if Santa Anita will go along with this, but Del Mar's, they put on, if a horse runs 2 times in a row at Los Alamitos, it will not be eligible to run at Del Mar. So that would be what I would call a house rule, not a California or CHRB rule, but a house rule. And that's their choice. Obviously, so if I read that, if I'm reading that condition, I'm like, okay, well, I'll run once at Los Al, but then I'll come back and I'll run. And Harris, here's what I think's happening. You get a horse for 10 or 12,000. You don't want to lose it because it's in good form. And so you're going to take it to Los Al and run it 1,000 yards, allowance non-winners at 1 time at 1,000 yards, non-winners at 2 times at 1,000 yards. And that 10 or 12 claimer can be protected in that allowance race and make $16,000 to $18,000 purse. But the 10 or 12 claimer is about 22 to 24,000 at Santa Anita. So it is, again, there's just not enough horses to go around. Los Al's struggling to fill their card. Sometimes it spills over to the next day to fill the card. But there's just not enough of these horses to go around. And I know Santa Anita at one point said, well, you know, we want to make the bottom 10. It used to be 8, but that doesn't look good. Well, you know, some of these tracks, like you said, Monmouth Park, Churchill Downs, Oaklawn, maybe not 5,000 claimers, but definitely 7,500 claimers.
I've seen 5 at Keeneland.
Yeah. Okay. There you go. And Gulfstream 6,250. So I think they could write those at Santa Anita. And just like you said, those races that they ride at Los Alamitos, so the other guys could make a little money. Well, maybe you restrict those races and you run them at Santa Anita. You know, guys with less than 20 horses. Golden Gate does it. They ride in their conditions. Barns with less than 20 horses. 8,000 non-winners, whatever the condition is. But the parentheses say this race is for barns with less than 20 horses. Del Mar's going to have a race where it's guys with this maiden special weight to trainers with horses with less than 40 horses or 30 horses, whatever. I don't remember the number, but they're doing these to try and eliminate, like they've had maiden special weights maiden special weights for horses that were purchased for 150 or less at auction. Because
I remember that.
if you have these $1 million horses and they're coming in, they don't always, but they should just overpower the competition. So they're trying to do something for the little guy, but I do think they need to work together and utilize their horse population a little better.
In fact, it's funny you mentioned that maiden allowance for horses purchased for less than 150 or a homebred. And the very first winner was Baffert for Hal Earhart with Axman, a son of Indian Blessing, naturally. And so the best intentions don't always work.
Yeah.
I don't think that Santa Anita would be in any position now to restrict any horses from coming back that went to Oaklawn with what they're dealing with. I mean, I get in theory of what you're saying, but I don't think at this point, maybe a couple of years ago before this got out of hand.
It wasn't even horses, John. It was the whole barn. If you're going to ship a string, not if you're shipping a race or two, that's one thing. But if you're shipping 10, 12 horses, and there were 5 or 6 guys who did it with big barns, you got to choose. You want to be in California or you want to be there. And they could have held a little stronger.
Yeah.
Against those guys. They let them get away with it.
Now, I mean, you could run your first timer there in Oaklawn and then bring it out here, and then not pretty soon it's going to be eligible for ship and win.
Right.
You're paying to get your own horse back.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard of, they actually did that. There's a Calbred, Nyquist. He won at Gulfstream a couple weeks ago, and I'm like, why is he running there and giving up the Calbred main bonus? Well, their plan was to run second and then to come out here and win the maiden bonus and be eligible for ship and win and shipping money. The horse blew it by winning the race. Now they have to wait for the stake at Del Mar to run.
Horses will humble everybody in one way or another. They will fool you.
Yeah.
Well, I think if nothing else, we established that there is some hope for California racing, and there is some, easy fixes out there if the right people would make the right decisions in a timely way. And I hope they're listening and they're paying attention, and I hope you've got a good voice out there, Harris, and are letting them know some of these things that they should be doing and that they're paying attention, because I think time is of the essence for us out there more than we realize.
Yeah, and
well, I know Harris and I, we love California and our families are here. And like you said, John, there's nothing more beautiful in racing than that backdrop at Santa Anita. And, it would be a shame to see it, slowly go down. So I'm hoping that change will come soon. I'm hoping guys will work together and the tracks will work together and come up with a good game plan. And I really appreciate your ideas today, Harris.
I got to tell you, before we go off the show, yeah, Harris, you got some great ideas. I hope people are listening, but I got to tell you guys something about California. I love California. I actually thought about buying a place out there, just have a place on the West Coast, okay? And I hadn't been out there for many years, and then I went to the Breeders' Cup at Santa Anita, what was it, 2 years ago, whenever it was. I still can't get over how you guys deal with the traffic. I just don't understand it. I got out, I flew into LAX, okay? And I was staying at the Westin in Pasadena, which is not far from Santa Anita at all. So I get out, I get my rent-a-car. I ask my phone, hey, Siri, how do I get to the Westin in Pasadena? It says, oh, you're 14.6 miles away. Your ETA is 3 hours and 15 minutes. I said,
like Harris will tell you, it would sometimes be a 2 or 3 hour drive home from Hollywood Park. But if you won, that was no problem.
Listen, when you win, nothing hurts. That I get.
That's right.
I says to myself, that can't be right. All right, it's 14 miles away. Was it?
I will say this for California, it still has. So I've had some clients recently come from Washington and also from Arizona, and they haven't come a lot. It's their first time. They're spent the day at the races with me, and they're all like, man, this is so great. We want to move here, So I really just think we need more exposure, and we need more publicity, and we need to sell what we have to sell.
It's the traffic. It's the traffic. My friend lives out there. So one of the days after the races, I said, listen, let's meet for dinner. He goes, okay, great. We'll come to see you. I said, no. I said, I'm in California. I haven't been so long. I want to go to the best place in Beverly Hills. He goes, it can be 10 o'clock by the time we have dinner. I'm like, what are you talking about? I'll leave straight from the races. It's 10 miles away. He goes, you don't understand. That time of the day, forget about it. 3 hours. I don't know how you guys do it. I really don't know how you do it. I couldn't understand. I said, you know what? I love it out here, but I'm coming on vacation only. I don't know how you do it. The traffic is insane. And I grew up in New York City where the traffic was insane. Nothing like there, boy. I couldn't understand.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's something you get used to, and you just know that what should take you 15 minutes at 4 a.m. is going to take you about an hour and a half at 5 p.m. So,
yeah, I mean, I always joked with everybody. I live in Ventura County. I live 45 miles from Santa Anita. I live 35 miles from Hollywood Park, but it would take me twice as long to get to Hollywood Park because of the 405 being involved there. And it's just, you grow up, you get used to it, and it's just part of life.
All right. Yeah, no, I hear you. I mean, I grew up around a lot of traffic, but even there, they kind of floored me. From the moment I got out of the plane, I was like, wow, it's going to take me 3 hours to get to my.
It's like a great restaurant, John. There's always a line. You always got to wait to get in. So when it's good, a lot of people want to be here.
I'm getting old. I haven't waited online, and I go to the best restaurants in the world. Anywhere you ever want to go, I promise you, no line. Just
there we go. There we go.
You don't wait online at any restaurant. I don't care where it is, who it is. Don't worry about it. Won't happen. Yeah. I covered you too, Harris. Anywhere, even in California, but it's not my town. I get you in anywhere you want to go. No problem.
Nice. It's all in who you know.
No, it's not who you know. It's who knows you.
There you go.
But anyway, gentlemen, thank you so much. Harris, I can't thank you enough for coming on. You make a lot of sense. I mean, you've got your finger on the pulse of everything that's going on out there with some great ideas. I hope you can get them across, because I worry about California racing. I love California racing, even though I'm an East Coast guy. I was a Sunday Silence guy in the Easy Go with Sunday Silence rivalry. And I still say that Naira cheated with the track a little bit on Belmont Day, but that's a whole nother story. But I love California racing. I hate to see it even in question, to tell you the truth, because it's too good to for us to even be worried about it. So,
well, thank you both for having me, and let's all put we'll do our best, and
absolutely
keep good thoughts. And we have two of the greatest venues in the world, three of them. I love Golden Gate Fields, and it's just a matter of I'm very confident in Craig Fravel. I'm very confident of the new chair of the TOC, Gary Fenton, who's a brilliant guy and loves California. And hopefully the brighter minds will prevail.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Appreciate the time. Ciao for now.
Take care.
Vino Rosso has taken the lead, and it's a vintage performance by Vino Rosso.
Nobody does it better.